All right, everybody, we'll get this meeting underway here. Introduce myself, I'm Brian Roush, East China Supervisor since November, so I'm a little bit newer to the position. But got paired up here with a great group of folks looking at the St. Clair redevelopment of the DTE property here. So as you know, DTE invested a lot of money to lower emissions and put up a nice gas-fired power plant here to get rid of these coal-fired plants. So it's pretty exciting to be kind of on the verge of the new technology here. So as these things get, fired up and the coal plants kind of go away, we're looking at what we're going to do with the property. So we wanted to put together this committee to put together meetings like this so everybody in the community has kind of a voice to say what they'd like to see with the property and give everybody a little bit of informational guidance, I guess. So that being said, I'd like to turn over to Jeff, St. Clair County.
Somebody.
St. Clair County Board Chairman.
You don't need that.
So I've actually been on the board now for 17 years, and we've been involved in quite a bit of different projects and things with DTE. Got an opportunity to speak at their open house groundbreaking ceremony. If you think about DTE, their first investment in St. Clair County was in July of 1914. That is when World War I started. This particular plant over here, the St. Clair plant, came online in 1952. Then we have actually the Greenwood. A lot of people don't think about the Greenwood power plant, but we have that out in the Yale area that was built in the late 70s. And then we obviously have the Bell River plant here that started in early 80s. And, a lot of construction jobs, fed a lot of family for a lot of years here in St. Clair County. Super excited to be getting the new plant over here. I was at a couple meetings down in Trenton and River Rouge when they were talking about the plant closures, which are closing those particular plants. Those plants represent 40 to 60% of the total tax base in those communities. I often talk about the numbers in the tax base. If you look at DT as far as our top 10 taxpayers in St. Clair County, I think there are 913 million. The next closest one is just over 100 consumers. Enbridge, ITC's at 65, right, million. So as far as I can't underscore how big, how important, how fortunate we are to have these plants. Obviously, this is going to take some time to go through the planning. We were quite involved in the Marysville plant, tearing that plant down when they decided to go forward. I can assure you there are lots of, because some of the questions that had come up before, how do you know the property's put back and reused? How do you know that it's clean? We have actually a brownfield department in St. Clair County that keeps an eye on those sites. We received a large grant to do assessments on those. St. Clair County also owns the landfill where all that material from that particular site came to. That was tested, and I can assure you that particular site up there is 100% clean, ready to go. So these guys, DT is not going to leave something bad behind, right? Because next thing we'll do is we'll call our Congress people, we'll call our state reps, right? So we're fortunate to have them, because that's not always the story in some communities. It's really not. I mean, there's places you can go and look to. So I think I echo what Brian said a little bit. It's very early. We're looking for input. What is this thing going to look like, long-term moving forward? We don't know. We're here, we're open for ideas. This is the first step to a process, and everything is a process and takes time. So we do appreciate everybody coming out. I'm sure there's going to be lots of time for Q&A here coming, so thank you.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
You're good?
We're good. All right. Thanks everyone for coming out. Much appreciated. Thank you for the intro statements here. I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'm also going to introduce the members of our steering committee for this project. So first myself, I'm Adam Young. I'm a professional planner at Wade Trim. I've been working with East China Township as the township's planning consultant for about 5 or 6 years now. And kind of starting off this project, the discussions really started years ago. And now here we are at really the beginning of a planning process for what we're calling the St. Clair Riverfront Redevelopment Plan. And so my role is to serve as a technical planning consultant on the team here. And I wanted to just introduce the other members of our steering committee. And so we've got Jeff Bohm, already introduced yourself, from St. Clair County Board of Commissioners. We've got Supervisor Roush, East China Township Supervisor. Stephanie Barris is from DTE. She's a member of the steering committee. You'll hear from her tonight. We've got, I think, Wally. Wally Street is the East China Township Planning Commission Chair. We have Steve Demick is also East China Township Planning Commissioner and also with the St. Clair County Health Department, Environmental Health Department. Sherry Faust is here. She is the president of the Friends of the St. Clair River and also with the St. Clair County Environmental Health Department. And then Cindy Paparelli is the East China Township Manager in the back there. So that's our steering committee, and we've already had several meetings internally to start thinking about this process and obviously prepare for this meeting tonight. But this is really the first kickoff meeting. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the agenda. We've got you here, at least on paper, for a couple of hours. For the most part, this agenda tonight is informational, so it'll be Stephanie and myself going through presentations on these various topics here on screen. At the end of each kind of topic, we'll have an opportunity to take a pause and allow for you to have questions or ask questions of us, and we'll try our best as a team to try and answer them. We want to try and get through quite a bit tonight. If the Q&A is going a little bit long, I might tell you to pause. Let's kind of put a hold on the Q&A. We'll get on to the next topic. We'll see where we're at after we've kind of covered everything. At the very end of it, we would like to maybe hear from you. We do have a little worksheet that we'd like you to give some thought to. You can fill that out individually and turn it in before you leave tonight. Or take some more time if you want to be more thoughtful about it, give it some more thought, and you can turn it into the Township Hall at a later date. But for the most part, this is an informational presentation, so sit back and relax. We do have some water and cookies in the back. Please help yourself. Restrooms, are they?
Just past the doors on the left side.
Okay, restrooms just past the doors on the left side. So make yourself comfortable. And again, thank you so much for coming on out. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this project, give you a little big picture overview of the project. The partners that we've assembled. I had mentioned that we've been talking about this project really starting with the Township and working with the DTE for several years now. The Township has done a good job, I believe, of assembling a team of good partners that would help move this forward. I already mentioned the members of our steering committee that represent different interests, from the county to the Township to DTE to environmental groups and so on. Again, Wade Trim is the planning consultant. That's my team that's helping the Township from a technical side. I also wanted to mention that the Township took a unique step in kind of seeking out some outside funding for this project. So they were successful in writing a grant application through EGLE, Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, through their coastal management program. So they secured funding that is helping to fund this project in part, this planning project. That grant was secured at the end, it was submitted at the end of 2019, and we were able to go through the process and begin work at the beginning or toward some spring of this year here. Okay, so the map is on screen here that shows the study area. Some of you may be thinking, I'd like to get a copy of the slides from tonight's presentation. Absolutely, you can do that. I wanted to save paper, wasn't sure how many people would show up, so I didn't want to try and guess at printing 100 copies and wasting 50. So what we're going to do is we're going to make all of these slides available in PDF form. We'll put them on the Township website later this week. So if you check back later this week, you'd like a copy of the slides from tonight's presentation, you can get them from the Township website. So this project encompasses the DTE St. Clair Power Plant property, but it goes beyond. So it's not just a plan for the redevelopment of the DTE site. It includes lands beyond. In fact, the total study area is 480 acres, or a little bit more than 480 acres. It includes the Township Hall, Township Park, additional residences, multiple family uses, some commercial uses, the wastewater treatment, the Township's water treatment facility as well. So this study, what we're looking at is not just a focus of the DTE site, and it's in recognition that the DTE site doesn't just live in a vacuum or on an island of its own. It's integrated amongst other uses, residential, commercial, industrial. And so if we're going to plan think about conceptually how the DTE site, could transition over time, we also have to think about the surrounding land uses. And some of you probably are residents either nearby or maybe within the study area. And so we rest assured that we're going to be considering how land use, how transportation facilities, infrastructure is kind of all intertwined within this study area. So this map kind of shows the study area, which is in the central portion of East China Township. And you can see the St. Clair River there. So we're kind of in the middle of the river, if you consider, about halfway between Lake Huron and Lake St. Clair. So one of the reasons we're looking at this, or the township wanted to move forward with this study, is they know that this could have a significant regional impact and opportunities to benefit the region. So with the closure of a power plant, you have a large site that's heavily kind of industrialized right now that could become an opportunity for redevelopment. That economic development potential, it could attract job producers or different diverse land uses. There's also an opportunity to restore and protect the environment and encourage environmental sustainability. There's an opportunity to potentially have new public lands or opportunities to recreate in and near the water. So that's some of the reasons for this study. The township is thinking, okay, well, what are going to be the keys to having a successful plan? Certainly, with DTE being the largest landowner within the study area and clearly a major stakeholder, we wanted to ensure that this plan has close coordination with DTE Energy. And that's why DTE Energy is with us tonight and a part of this process. We wanted to ensure that there's a strong public educational component. Hopefully you'll learn a lot from tonight's presentation. I think we'll all learn a lot. It's hard to find experts in the field of environmental remediation and coal plant decommissioning. So we're going to kind of learn together through this process, and I hope that it'll be very informative. We're going to try and engage you through meetings like this and other opportunities to help you, or you can help us better understand what are priorities for you in the redevelopment of this study area. We want to hear your ideas for that. We want to make sure that this plan identifies some of the regional market and opportunities. So what's out there? What can we take advantage of or capitalize on? And certainly we want to be prepared and kind of set the stage and build momentum for implementation of this plan over time. And then speaking of over time, I want to make sure that everyone's on kind of the same page with this, that this plan, as Jeff said, this is just the beginning, and really when the plan ends, we hope to have some ideas for conceptually what can occur in the future and some recommendations for that. But we have to understand, and at least at our team, our intent is to ensure that this plan has a long-term viewpoint, a long-term vision for the future of the riverfront. We need to recognize that implementation on a project like this can only occur over an extended period of time. Additionally, we are talking about redevelopment opportunities today, 2021, August 3rd, 2021. A long-term and a good plan, a successful plan, needs to be flexible and adaptable, and understanding that market conditions change over time. Change is inevitable. So we want to make sure that our recommendations are flexible, so that if something happens or there's a little bit of a change in whatever next year, that we don't have to go back and amend this plan and go through this process again. So what exactly is this plan or what are we gonna have at the end of this process? Well, this project is a planning study. What we are doing is preparing a study, a district plan, a waterfront district redevelopment plan here. It's going to be a component of the township's master plan. The township has a township-wide plan for the future of its community. Walter's got a copy of that master plan. He's holding it up if you want to take a look at it. And so in that plan, it has recommendations for how the township should grow and develop over time. This plan is going to be a small element of the master plan, and it's actually going to be called, officially, it's a sub-area plan of the township's broader master plan. So there will be an actual report, will be an end product of this plan. It will go through, and I'll mention it in a second, it will go through a formal, official public hearing with notices provided in accordance with state law. That'll be held by the Planning Commission, but that'll be much later in the process. What will be some of the content of the plan? So ultimately what we're going to endeavor to do is establish a planning and design framework. That's one key component of the plan. We're going to look at land use characteristics and development character. We'll look at height and bulk requirements like setbacks and building orientation and building heights and parking and things of that nature. Public space is a framework for how and where and in what character can we provide public spaces within this study area. Circulation, so recommendations about roads and streets and sidewalks and other pedestrian or bicycle facilities and vehicular facilities. Environmental protection, so a framework, recommendations, strategies for how we can protect the environment within this study area over time. How can we incorporate sustainable design principles into development that occurs within the study area or the redevelopment of the waterfront site? And infrastructure, what type of infrastructure improvements are needed to support the type of development that's contemplated over time? We're not going to have specific engineered drawings or site plans that would say, there's going to be a 6,000 square foot building here and a 62 space parking lot here. But we will have some illustrations and kind of concepts, ideas, highlighting or trying to show what are some opportunities, what could be, what are some good things that could be achieved. Just on screen there, this is not the study area, of course. We're nowhere near that to that point. But just some ideas or representative graphics that show some illustrations that might be included in the plan. And of course, implementation strategies. We want to make sure that there's a clear roadmap for the township and its partners to help implement the recommendations of the plan over time. And then lastly, before I open it up for some questions on this section here, the schedule for this planning project. So we started earlier this year doing some background and existing conditions evaluations. I'll present to you some of the highlights and what we found. We also looked at environmental characteristics. And here we are tonight at the public informational kickoff meeting. So this is really the first launch of this project to the public. So we're, again, trying to provide some good information for you tonight so you have a good understanding of what this project is all about. After this meeting, then we're going to get into some additional work and research and analysis. We're going to maybe look at some redevelopment scenarios. We're going to start thinking about the future, what could be. But we're, of course, going to come back to you in a session maybe in the same facility, but you might be sitting around tables for that session. I'm not sure. We'll come up with the format for it. But right now we're calling it a public visioning or charrette session. Basically, that's going to be more about, we're going to try and work with you to bring in ideas to help provide some feedback to our team so that we know what you would like or what you'd like to see moving forward for this project. And then it kind of continues on. So we're looking at before the end of March 31st next year to have this planning project finished up. As I said, there will be a public hearing in front of the Planning Commission that would occur probably at the end of this year, maybe January or February of next year. So I'll stop it there for questions about this plan or this planning process. Anyone? Questions? Okay. Yes?
I'm just,
Would you like to, yeah, since we do have this meeting, it's going to be recorded and it'll be on TV. Could you come up?
oh,
I know it's so scary. That's okay. We're not gonna
do you
we're not
want,
gonna heckle you or anything like that.
do you want me to move? I just moved up because I couldn't see.
It's perfectly fine, no problem.
I just wondered, I'm 3 houses down from where the freighters unload the coal,
Okay.
and I just wondered how long what are they, the towers will be there, if there's a plan that those will come down.
Okay.
This is probably a question that's coming up, or an answer.
Great question. We will answer that question. If we don't, please bring it back up again. But I do believe that Stephanie, you'll probably cover timing of that during your presentation a little bit.
The answer is it depends.
It depends.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take
You might
it.
hear that a lot from me tonight. There you go, I'm previewing just a bit, but essentially, yeah, we'll cover some of that,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. Thanks for being brave and coming up and asking the first question. Now we got that out of the way, so no problem for anyone else, right? Okay. All right, Stephanie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, let's see. Okay, all good, Paul, if I get the okay from Paul, so that's good. So hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Barris. I am with DTE Energy. I serve in a corporate and government affairs capacity for the company. I work in St. Clair and Macomb counties. So nice to have you all out here tonight. We appreciate your time. I'm going to run through this really fast because I want to make sure we get to the meat of what we came here to cover. But thought that it might not hurt just to give you an idea of what's going on at the company and allow you to ask any questions. So a big part of what DTE is involved in right now is really starting to reduce our carbon footprint and transitioning from coal-fired power plants, which brings us together tonight, into more clean, renewable sources of energy. So in 2016, we passed energy legislation in partnership with consumers and a couple of other entities within the state to basically produce benchmarks of renewable energy capacity percentages. And in 2021, we have to be at 15% of all of our energy generation coming from renewable sources. So those percentages go up in increments each year. And as we close down coal-fired power plants, we're looking at ways that we're diversifying our generation sources to be able to not only obtain those goals and those percentages, but also reduce energy use through demand response and energy efficiency programs. So, there we go, magic. One thing that we have done throughout all the work that we've been doing in the state is really making sure that we can source things locally. Part of what DTE's commitment was back, I want to say it started in 2010, which it says it did, it says that on the slide. We've spent over $2 billion in the state with Michigan-based suppliers. So if we can procure things here, we want to. If there are things that you know of or you have business contacts that we might be interested in, let me know. Let any of us know. We can pass information along to our procurement agencies. The project Blue Water Energy Center just to the east of us has over $300 million in local spend of that project here in Michigan. So we've been able to keep a lot of that money right here in the state, which is very important to us, and we want to continue to keep doing that. Thank you. Let's skip through this one. So part of the effort in decarbonizing our generation sources is retiring coal plants. We actually just officially retired our first coal plant on May 31st of this year in River Rouge. So I had the opportunity to be down there for that ceremony. The decommissioning process has begun in River Rouge. We're going to be doing the same thing that we're doing here in St. Clair in Trenton at the same time. Both Trenton and St. Clair Power Plant are scheduled to close probably by the end of May of 2022. So a little over 9 months from now. So it's not too far away when you think about it. St. Clair Power Plant was commissioned in 1953. It's 2022. She's had a good run. So she will be well past 70 by the time that plant does come offline, and at that same time, the Blue Water Energy Center will be coming online to replace some of that generation. Big difference between the two plants. St. Clair will take about 12 to 24 hours to ramp up if it needs to go on. Blue Water can do it in about 12 minutes. So that's the difference in technology. That's the difference in ability to generate on-demand power as temperatures increase and decrease, and as our load demand increases and decreases. This time of year, obviously, we're on the higher side of the house, but in the wintertime, we have the ability to help others who might need power generation in other states through MISO, which is one of our regulators, basically throughout the 7 states that we're zoned in, not to get too technical or in the weeds. And then just to kind of wrap up at a high level, what we're really trying to do, like I said, cleaner energy, we're looking at infrastructure redesign, we're looking at technology within our distribution operations, i.e. poles and wires and substations, to make the system more resilient, to make it more reliable, and to make it better for you all running your homes, your businesses, your schools, your communities. So part of that work is tree trimming. We know that everybody loves trees. We all love trees, they're beautiful. They also follow power lines, and they take the power lines out, and sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get those things repaired. In communities where we've had tree trimming, we've seen 60 to 70% increase in reliability. So while they're beautiful, we need to plant the right trees in the right places. And as we go through that process, we hope to see more improvements in reliability in communities where we've seen trees really impact their ability to serve customers in a good way. So this is the fun stuff. So this is what you see when you drive down M29. I think there's probably there may still be a crane in the air. But this process, to give you an idea, Adam talked a lot about how much time these things take. We started figuring this out and going through the exercise of what blue water might be, I believe, in 2011. So we began designing, having internal conversations, trying to figure out what the technologies were for the future and what that looked like in terms of what we needed going into our next generation of energy supply. So that process not only included engineering and design, it includes a process with the Michigan Public Service Commission to go through almost like a legal case. It's about a 270-day process where we present a plan, and we have the ability to go in front of the commission and the staff and explain what our plan is, what the benefits are, what we intend to do, what the cost is, et cetera, et cetera. During that time, it also gives people an opportunity to voice concerns, voice support, and really have a conversation similar to the format Adam's described here with what we're doing over the next few months with Township, to really get a sense of, is this good, is this not good, what are we not thinking about, what are we not considering, who have we not thought about, how does this impact not only our generation, but what the state looks at as a whole. Michigan is unique. Michigan's a peninsula, so we can't put poles and wires over the Great Lakes. So we have to have a certain level of generation done within state to be able to supply the percentages that our regulators require. So when you look at how the composition of this works, those are the things that you have to keep in mind when you're building new facilities and new generating sources. So there's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of people far smarter than me that figure this stuff out. Next slide, please. And so just a quick look, this is a recent picture of blue water. This is what you'll see completed about 9 months from now. We are about 80% completion. We are going to start the commissioning process of the facility and testing it this fall. So if you hear steam blowing in the fall and hear loud noises for 7 days, I apologize in advance. We will be letting Cindy and everybody know, but we will be going through a process where you may hear some steam and some noises. It's temporary, it's testing, it's not forever, you're not going to hear it every day. So that's going to be something that's going to start up this fall as we complete the building of the facility. Next slide, please. And this is what it looks like as of right now. So it's pretty cool when you think about it. So you've got the crane that you probably have seen from M29. You've got, here are your 2 steam generators. Here's your cooling tower. That's our warehousing and our administrative building over to the east. But it's pretty impressive what's been done in a very short period of time. We broke ground in 2018, August 2018. And 3 years later, We almost have the full power plant ready to go. Next slide, please. All right. That was a lot. Any questions? All right. I'll start this one and I'm going to hand it back over to Adam. So, as I said, DTE is going to retire St. Clair in May of 22. Question about the coal and the stacks. So we'll get into this later, but Bell River is going to operate until 2030. That's our plan right now. Bell River needs coal. The coal comes from the river at St. Clair. So that stuff you're going to see for a while. It's not going to go anywhere. Just because we close the plant doesn't mean we're going to tear it down right away. So keep that in mind as we go through this, because like Jeff said, there's a process that's involved with decommissioning, doing studies, turning things off the right way according to our regulators and the process that Adam's going to walk through, and then figuring out what is the next step for us. So there's a lot that goes into it. So just because it closes in May of next year, don't think it's going to be immediately torn to the ground due to those steps that have to happen to decommission it properly. And with that, I'm going to hand it to Adam to talk about that process.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go through from a general perspective, the coal plant decommissioning process. Stephanie's not quite off the hook. She's going to pop in and jump in as necessary. She talked a little bit more specifically about the St. Clair power plant, and I think there's going to be some slides after this that will, again, get into more specifics about the retirement of the St. Clair power plant. But these next handful of slides here are kind of from a general perspective, what is the process to decommission a coal plant? The source of this data, and you can look it up as well, there's the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has a really good summary document, and they also have some very detailed with a whole bunch more technical information that kind of covers this process. But it is, as EPA suggests, often a complex and certainly a multi-year process. This graphic here, the flow chart, kind of shows 3 steps, and then throughout the process is this idea and the reiterating the importance of having stakeholder engagement throughout. So the first couple of steps, a significant step in the process, is the shutdown of the plant and the decommissioning of the plant itself. Then the next phase is the remediation phase, really the environmental cleanup phase. And then the third phase is the redevelopment phase. We agree with EPA's, this next point, and the next bullet here on the slides, that the planning for the future, planning for site reuse options and ideas and concepts is very important. And even though redevelopment occurs at the very end, having an understanding at least of the opportunities and potential site reuse options really helps to inform decisions that are made earlier on in the process. And so that's, we took that to heart and said, okay, well, we ought to start this process with a planning study from certainly the perspective of the township to make sure that the township is prepared. But also this is going to inform, the results of this study are going to certainly inform DTE's thoughts about what they can do and their understanding of what could be at the site and what it means to help throughout this multi-year process. So the shutdown and decommissioning phase begins with the announcement of the closing that has occurred for the St. Clair power plant. But there are, again, this is not anything about DTE here, but in general, the owner of the power plant has several options to consider for managing this decommissioning process. It could be where the owner maintains full control throughout the process, or maybe they select a third party to help oversee it, or potentially, the power plant owner could sell the property to somebody else, or maybe even a governmental entity. The removal of equipment and materials at the site, even demolition of facilities and buildings, all can be done in compliance with the state permitting requirements. That's all involved in this shutdown and decommissioning phase. The remediation phase is really the environmental cleanup components of the process. It includes environmental assessments and investigations from folks who have the expertise to really understand and know what is out there. Is there materials that need to be cleaned up? What are going to be the federal and state requirements that need to be followed in order to accomplish that? What are the specific requirements and standards and limitations for that? During this time, again, as we said, the type of remediation that needs to occur is in part going to be defined by the type of reuse or the type of opportunities later on. For example, if the site reuse is maybe industrial, you might not need remediation to the level that you would if the site reuse is residential, given the fact that people would live there over time. So there's different standards and different requirements for what needs to take place based on the end use. Certainly, environmental investigations, soil borings, and things of that nature to document the contamination. A cleanup plan, I don't know if that's the correct term, but basically a plan for the remediation of the site needs to be prepared for and approved by state and federal regulators. And then the cleanup plan is implemented over time. Again, as Stephanie said, we don't have specifics about it's going to take 6 months or it's going to take 4 years. Details like that will need to be established and can't be established now, will be established later, but it's kind of unknowns at this point. And then the redevelopment phase. So this is the last phase in the process where you can, again, we start thinking about the redevelopment early to inform the initial phases, but the redevelopment phase includes where you identify through site design and engineering to actually come up with a plan for the reuse facilities of the site. The local government review process comes into play. Certainly, East China Township, plans that are submitted for whatever the redevelopment would be, whether it's residential or mixed use or commercial or industrial, needs to go through the township, through the planning commission, township board, and other review processes. Construction occurs, all of this, of course, done in accordance with environmental controls. And then I'll finish up this with just talking about the different costs and financing options. Again, the costs are going to depend on the anticipated end use. It might be, costlier for this process, depending on whether it's going to be residential or other types of uses moving forward. But there are a variety of financing mechanisms. For example, the township has already tapped into, some planning grants to support this effort. And Jeff talked about, from St. Clair County, having a brownfield redevelopment arm and expertise in that area. Certainly that there's funding that can be tapped in and available to help with whether it's the decommissioning phase or the remediation phase. There could even be grants and financing options available at the redevelopment phase as well. Just on screen are a handful of of potential financing options. And then again, if you want to, Google these keywords, you can find some additional information about this process from a general perspective. And then I'll turn it back over to Stephanie to talk a little bit more specifics back to TTE's process.
Okay, so getting a little bit more specific into what we're going to do in St. Clair, what we are thinking about. So our biggest goal is to make sure we hear from all of you. We hear from Adam, Jeff, Brian, Cindy. We want to know what the community's desires are for this area, so we can take that into account as we go into our planning process to determine what the next steps might be. Like Adam said, it is a long process. We've got folks that are starting to walk through the facility now to figure out what are the first steps we can do as we begin the decommissioning process, and it's going to take some time. So, but our primary goal is to make sure that we have heard you, we understand kind of what the community wants, and we can take that feedback into our process as we go through this in the years ahead. Keep going, I kind of just did that slide. This is the more fun slide. So this diagram gives you an idea of what the property looks like. Hang on one sec here. Okay, you guys can you hear me, Paul? Good. So this diagram kind of gives you an idea of what the property looks like. Here's your riverfront. You still have the ability to, or you have the ability to see kind of what the footprint is. So we have coal storage that is still going to be maintained with the Bell River Power Plant being in operation. This is actually the coal for the Bell River Power Plant. It's western coal that's burned, cleaner coal. And then we also have different repositories and things that this may be part of the remediation immediately, but this kind of gives you an idea of what this looks like. Let's go to the next slide. There's a better picture of it. That's a little bit better. So this, like I said, is going to stay put here. You're going to still have your entry of you're still going to have your coal freighters for a little bit longer. I've been asked that question too, as to when the coal freighters are going to go away. They're going to still be there for a little bit longer. Like I said, right now, Bell River is slated to run until 2030. St. Clair powers Bell River with the barges of coal and with the process for the coal to come over. The panel across M29 that carries the coal over will still be operational as long as Bell River is in operation. But that gives you an idea of what kind of the footprint looks like. So you may not see physical change immediately, but we will be planning and kind of figuring out what those steps are to actually go through those physical changes when the time is right and when we're able to, based on what needs to be maintained at the Bell River site, or at the St. Clair site to run Bell River. I'm going to pause there. Any questions there? Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I was just thinking until 30, because you said at 30 the Bell River plant would be decommissioned or whatever. We aren't talking a great deal of land as compared to what you own. You meaning DTE. I'm looking at that red stripe up to the white stripe and a little blue intake over there.
Yep.
And then the plant. That's about the only amount of land that will be developed before 30. Is that correct?
Not exactly. So it could be. It depends on what needs to be used in this area. There's still areas on the dock that needs to be used to be able to convert the coal and carry the coal over and run the process for Bell River to run. So this may look the same physically for 10 years. This may still look exactly how it looks now until 2030 potentially. It may not. I don't know the answer to that, but just know that it could. It's going to depend on how they've configured the working operations to keep Bell River going until 2030. If things develop quicker and we're able to retire parts of St. Clair and start decommissioning parts of it as Bell River is running, we're going to explore that too. So that's all being discussed right now. But like I'm saying, you may not see a lot of physical change due to the fact that St. Clair still plays a vital role in powering Bell River for the next, it'll be 8 years now that we're almost in 2022. Does that answer your question? You're welcome. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about the new area that would do the cooling water intake. That runs directly to the Bell River plant. And so that would not be a touched closure of Bell River.
It may not get touched at all because it's actually going to support blue water as well. So there may be some ways that they alter it to allow it to support the Blue Water Energy Center that's coming online next year. It probably will look different in some capacity. I just can't tell you exactly how that looks right now. But knowing that it's supporting our new power plant, it may be there in some capacity.
Well, will the new generating station depend on water for cooling?
It will, but it's much more efficient. It actually is going to have its own steam process to help cool it within the system. Blue water runs similar to the way an airplane runs. So if you know how a jet engine runs, and Cindy, I can get you some links to how this works for the website. But essentially, the two turbines that we're building at Blue Water run like the jet engines, or the jet propellers on a jet. So they ramp up and they ramp down. The water is actually goes back through the facility and is recycled as much as possible, and it's much more efficient. So we will likely see less but we will likely still see some use of that area. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I just wondered how long that's going to stick out each year.
That question I can't answer for you at this point. That's where my "it depends" comes in, right?
Why not?
If I had a crystal ball, but yeah, I mean, those are the things that we have to figure out, right? We have to figure out what do those dynamics look like, new plants coming on, old plants coming off, what do we have to keep as essentially to help us run those plants, and what can we work on to redevelop that area in a way that works for everybody. So, yep.
Excuse me for asking a second question, but as I get the drift of what we're talking about, the next 10 years, you'll have very little change in the use of the land that you now control, that we call DTE as a group. I'm asking the question, in the next 10 years, the property will remain pretty much the same. Use of the property internally for you will change. But from a community standpoint, the fence lines and all the things that we see around the property are going to be still there and not developed or hardly developed.
Yep, yeah, at this point, that's accurate, yes. I mean, until we have both of the coal plants retired, you can't, like I said, we have to keep things up and operational to help Bell River run. So like I said, you may not see a lot of change in the actual footprint of the plant. But to Adam's point, we want to know as we figure out what is going to happen there, because once we have the ability to move on that process, we've been able to move quick. We demolished Connors Creek pretty quickly this past year as part of the FCA development in Detroit. So we want to know what we're going to do there. So we got to, that takes planning. Like I said, the Blue Water Energy Center took a lot of years to plan. This is going to take a lot of years to plan. So we want to start doing this and talking about it now. So when that time comes, you guys aren't looking at the same thing you've been looking at for those times that are there. So hopefully that helps. I know it's not a definitive answer, but I hope that gives you some perspective.
It just gives us
Yep.
an idea.
Yep.
So we're going to do upfront planning, and then we need to have some patience
Yes.
to wait for it
Yes.
to be implemented over time.
Absolutely. But yeah, that kind of gives you an idea of what the footprint of the property looks like. So hopefully that's helpful. All right. I think that's where, do I have any more?
Yeah.
You covered that. So actually, I'll run through this one real quick. So Adam kind of talked about the stages. This is kind of how DTE looks at plant decommissioning. Do we maintain and stand by? We're going to be doing a little bit of that, right? We're going to be maintaining the parts of this that we need to in order to run Bell River and kind of standing by until we can move on it. Other things that we've done is we've gone cold and dark, decommissioned, or sell as is. So, I mean, essentially, we're going to work through the decommissioning process, but these are kind of the options that have been laid out on the table from where DTE sits. Next slide, please. And like I said, we're working on it. I think that's kind of the message. We're working on it, and this is one of the first steps to make sure we're including the feedback from the community that lives in the area to figure out what is desirable in that area, so we take that back and have the right conversations with the right folks internally. So with that, being mindful of time, I'll turn it back over to Adam. Any other questions on that?
Okay, so I'm going to cover some highlights of the existing conditions assessment. So this is one of the things that we have done some work on at this point. And when you're thinking about master planning or conceptual planning, long-range planning, it's very similar to even planning for like a family vacation, right? So you need to first understand the resources that you have today, or where are you today, right? And understand what can, my son likes this, my wife likes this, what's a good mix for all of us that we can appreciate, right? And so that helps you then choose where do you want to go in the future. But then, of course, there's the roadmap for how to get there. So what we're looking to do with this existing conditions is have a better understanding of where are we today, of what's in place today within our study area. Not just the DTE site, but our study area as a whole. Once we have a good understanding of that, we can talk about moving forward. So this really provides kind of the baseline assessment for what we have today. So we took a look at existing land use. So how is the land within the study area being used today? And so we've got a map that's color-coded there that you can see on screen. The bright yellow is our properties in the study area that are occupied by single-family homes. So that's residential dwellings, detached residential dwellings. You can see that they're concentrated along kind of the lake shore, both north and south of the DTE facility there. We also have just a couple of the orange color there. This would be multifamily residential, so higher intensity residential. We've got an apartment complex and then an assisted living or senior living facility on the north end. So a couple of those multiple family housing types are in the study area. And you've got in the purplish the purplish color is the utilities. That's the DTE owned property and the power plant site right in the middle there. That occupies almost half of the study area, about 45% of the study area. Recreation, you can see the Township Park there. We included that in the study area. Obviously, we want to make sure that there are connections and we can take advantage of that really great municipal recreational facility and how that can play and intertwine and interact with the other uses within this study area. And that bright red are just a few commercial uses in the study area, not many on Park Street, Park Drive there. In the cyan color, we've got semi-public, so there's a church within the study area. And the township hall is indicated in the bluish color, and then that is a water treatment facility, is another township-owned facility within the study area. So that's on that previous map. You saw those colors kind of encompassing the entire properties, even though maybe only a portion of those properties are actually developed. So this one's interesting, and you can kind of really just make out little black dots, except for a couple of larger ones in the center. So that, the large black kind of concentration, that's actual building, or the black colors are building footprints within the study area. And so that's the DTE St. Clair Power Plant building footprint right there. Just the footprint itself in terms of area is 370,000 square feet for that facility. So that's obviously the largest building in the study area in terms of the footprint. Aside from that, and then maybe the assisted living facility or the apartment complexes, which are, maybe assisted living has a footprint of maybe 50,000 square feet, the church maybe 5,000 square feet. But the remainder are, scattered small single-family dwellings, predominantly within the study area, generally surrounded by larger properties. In particular, along the lakefront, a lot of the single-family homes are narrow but deep. There are some in this kind of southeastern corner of the study area, some kind of canal, smaller lots fronting the canals there. So that map and some of the pictures here show some of the land use characters of what's going on within the study area today. So we certainly need to know and understand, as of today, what the township has proposed for and what they currently regulate for in terms of the study area land. So we're talking about currently adopted master plan and zoning codes. So East China Township, the currently adopted master plan is dated 2015. And so that map on the left side there shows the color coding for the future land use classifications within this waterfront study area. So a future land use classification is basically the township's indication of policy over time, again, long range, of their desire for what types of land uses should occur over time. So you've got in green, the township park facility. You've got in red some commercial facilities. In that brownish color is multiple families. So even though some of those lands are vacant today, you can see that the currently adopted master plan calls for some additional multiple family residential growth. And right now, the DTE power plant site is simply shown in the master plan as industrial. So basically the entirety of that site, and even a little bit beyond, is planned for industrial. Now, as I said, this project, we're going to be looking at this and reconsidering and reevaluating. So we may come up with completely different types of allocation of future land use, but that is something that we will address as part of this plan. But we do need to understand what's there today.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
They have to be updated every 5 years, master plan.
Yeah, so we, Cindy and I just talked about that. While this is good for you and the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission will need to take a look at it. They don't necessarily have to update it, but they have to review it every 5 years, just to make sure that it's still consistent with the township's goals and desires for the future. Yeah.
We have been doing it every 5 years, so.
Good, good.
We'll
You're on the ball.
we'll blame this one on COVID.
The map on the right is zoning district designations within the study area as currently adopted. So it's fairly similar. You can kind of see how the plan has implemented and kind of been reflected in the current zoning districts. The yellow is a R2, it's a one-family, single-family residential zoning district. You do have in brown the multiple family. And then right now, the DTE facility in the middle is actually zoned Industrial 2 district. The Industrial 2 district in the current township zoning code allows a good variety of some fairly intensive industrial type uses. Coal plant, power plant, of course, but other uses, consider building material storage yards, junk yards, and things of that nature. So there's a pretty broad mix of intensive uses allowed in that zoning district. So that is also something that we'll be reevaluating as part of that study. Does it make sense to continue to have that heavy industrial zoning district in this middle of this study area or not? And so these are things that are going to be on the table and discussions that we'll have.
For example, in Marysville, where they tore that plant down, the city rezoned it to a planned unit development, which gives you multiple, basically the city can choose, pick and choose, whatever comes in there. A much more flexible zoning than just if you're industrial.
Right. Yeah, more flexible, allows for some unique type of development, maybe some mixture of uses in there. Yep.
So then, are you guys looking at doing the park one day as maybe single-family residence then?
Yeah, it's interesting that don't be scared off by that. It's not uncommon for like a township facility or even a park to be zoned residential. That does allow parks. The township has no intentions of giving up that park property or allowing it to be developed as single family. There's typically not such a thing as a recreational zoning district. Usually parks, township municipal facilities are often zoned single family residential. Don't let that scare you off. But that's
No,
a
it's not
good
scary,
thing
I
to,
just saw
yeah.
it, I just was
Yeah,
curious.
it's a great question.
Thing I did,
Yeah, good question. Infrastructure, there's a lot of infrastructure here. Stephanie talked about, the power plant infrastructure, the ITC, electric transmission lines and the MAT that's located, at the DTE facility right now. But we also have, township services and facilities. This is really kind of the center of the township, with the township hall being located here and the township park being located here. It's a great, middle point for all residents to access this area. So in that sense, it's kind of like the heart of the township. Opportunities there. Water, sewer lines are all, public infrastructure is well in place to serve this entire study area. Transportation. You are all familiar with the roads here. Obviously, we have the state highway that runs north-south through our study area. It is a designated truck route. According to MDOT, they call it a minor arterial road. It just means that it's designed to handle quite a bit of traffic at relatively higher speeds to move people through. That dashed blue line is the non-motorized regional trail. the Bridge to Bay Trail, which is a great amenity that runs in and through this study area. You can think about, expanding upon that as maybe part of the redevelopment or tapping into it or connecting to it. Certainly an opportunity. The natural features, so this map here shows some of the wetlands and floodplains. Obviously in the darker blue is the river itself. You also have the Bell River that kind of touches the southern end of the study area. The wetlands are shown there. There aren't, wetlands are in the kind of the smaller blue circles with the checked lines. According to at least the National Wetlands Inventory, there are a few, but not many wetlands within the waterfront district. The floodplains, you have quite a bit of the land, especially in the southeastern part of the study area, and a little bit along the riverfront is within the 100-year flood. Obviously, I know of the flooding that has occurred, recently, and so we also have the 500-year flood zone that's, in the purple there. So we do have quite a bit. Township Park, a lot of that is in the flood zone right now. So certainly we need to understand the carrying capacity and constraints of the land in order to support any future development. And at the same time, we can think about, and we'll talk about this in a minute, how can we plan and design to help improve the resiliency in the natural environment, maybe shoreline protection and things to help mitigate or try and limit flooding. And so that brings up, just kind of in summary about these existing conditions, or what we found, is that certainly the conditions offer but pose both opportunities and challenges for redevelopment within the study area. You've got the riverfront, major opportunity, right, for public access and open space, or the transportation access, whether it's recreational or freight that it provides. The natural environment, dealing with a coal plant remediation, you have potential contamination issues, and so you've got that as a challenge. But you've got the opportunity to maybe improve a shoreline and restore the shoreline, or employ sustainable design practices and new development that would occur that would help improve resiliency within this study area. Now, the infrastructure is already in place to be able to support development, but at the same time, we've got the infrastructure that needs to remain, at least for the short period of time, to support the Bell River Power Plant. And what that means is there still may be fences and things of that nature, for the time being, to work around that. Obviously, we can't allow people to, for safety and security, to access those restricted areas. And certainly the economic development, opportunities out there for maybe an increased tax base, tourism, from the enhanced riverfront access. So, we're not there yet, but we're thinking about these challenges and opportunities that we can tap into and or will need to address as part of this planning effort. So any questions for this segment here, existing conditions analysis? I shouldn't have to even tell you guys. You live there, you know it well, right? But any questions, comments? Okay. Great. Okay. So what I'd like to do is go through some best practices for waterfront planning. So at this point, we've been kind of showcasing information, providing you information about this process, this project, opportunities and constraints. What I wanted to do to really set the stage for this plan, again, recognizing that it's going to happen over time, but we will have an opportunity to consider, what is the future of this study area 15 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and what could it be? And so just to kind of get you thinking ahead, I would like to present to you for consideration best practices in waterfront planning. So these aren't necessarily best practices that our team has even discussed, quite frankly, and said, yes, this is what we need to do in this particular study area. But this is actually from the US EPA, their manual that they've come up with that outlines 10 principles for smart growth for waterfront communities and districts, essentially. And so I wanted to just showcase those 10 principles for you to kind of start us thinking ahead toward the future and what could be. And what could we do? What are some best practices that have been done in other communities for waterfront planning? And then the last thing that we'll do is I have a little worksheet that I'm going to hand out to you. So as we're kind of going through these 10 on that worksheet, I'm going to ask you to tell me, just through a 1 through 4 ranking, is that principle of great importance within the study area, or is that principle of not at all importance in the study area? So as you kind of go through here, I'm going to allow you to tell us what you think about these, each of these principles, and whether they're greatly applicable within our study area or not at all. So think about that as I go through these. So the first best practice is to provide a mixture of use, including water-dependent use. Jeff mentioned, in what community was that kind of planned for a mixed-use development, planned unit development? That was Marysville, did you say? Yeah, Marysville. So that's kind of following a best practice to not necessarily plan for a single use, but allow for a variety of uses. It could be public use, right? Public access to the riverfront. It could be industrial, commercial or residential, or a combination thereof. But giving thought and providing coming up with a thoughtful mix to create a vibrant, sustainable community. If you have one type of use, let's say it's all industrial, that means you might have a workforce during the day, but nothing happening in the evening. If you have a mixture of use that might include maybe commercial or residential, you can actually have people coming in and out during the day, and you have residents living there in the evening. With recreational access, there might be there as well that additional, that could be the weekend type use, right? So it helps to create, kind of more activity within waterfront areas. A best practice is to preserve working waterfronts, or at least recognize that, a lot of the historic development along lakes and rivers is a working nature. Industrial, port facilities, commercial uses, fishing, recreational, that's all part of the working waterfront. So don't ignore that, and include that as part of your ideas or thinking for what types of uses could happen moving forward. And certainly facilitating public access and connections, to the water. So the mix of public uses within the private uses as well is important and recommended as a best practice. The second one is taking advantage of compact community design. It kind of goes without saying that if you accommodate more use on less land, it's essentially being more efficient in the use of land. There aren't, quite frankly, there's a limited amount of waterfront, riverfront land. And so, there is at a premium, so to speak. So, a best practice that many communities that the EPA recommends that communities consider is to allowing, for example, more intensification within waterfront communities, higher density. The advantages of having, having the compact design. Well, you already have infrastructure in place, and so you're kind of making good use of that infrastructure that's in place. The better use of that limited waterfront space. A higher, kind of density of development generally reduces runoff, and it could have flooding and stormwater positive benefits. And then again, facilitating, more dense and more activity facilitates kind of a sense of place, vibrancy and activity within a waterfront district.
That slide right there hits on something in me. So that's obviously a commercial development, right? The East China.
The picture there, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying, county's not going to develop that, but Tina Frazier with our Economic Development Alliance is in attendance tonight. So if those are types of reusages that we're looking, or something that the community wanted, our economic development team would go to the street and would go, they would talk to investors, developers, those types of things, and try to bring them to community to facilitate something like that. That's what they do. They chase companies into business and investment. So county's not doing it, they're not doing it, but there's opportunities. So depending on what would fit into something.
Sure. That's why we're building partnerships, and we talked about building momentum toward implementation. The more people you have at the table and partners that can help with this process, make this more realistic and viable over time. Provide a range of housing choice. Again, you might be thinking, well, that's not appropriate for this particular study area, but as a best practice, there's advantages to providing a mix of housing, whether it's smaller units or maybe larger units, potential single-family condominiums or attached condominiums. Some strategies that a lot of communities put into place within their waterfront districts as it relates to housing, to have somewhat of an increased density near the waterfront amenities, providing seasonal rentals and timeshares, providing workforce housing, allowing for some accessory dwellings, encouraging affordable housing options as well. Create walkable communities with water access. So walkability is something that is very important. Planning for communities and districts and sites that don't just accommodate the needs of an automobile, but also look to accommodate the needs of boaters, bicyclists, pedestrians, persons of all ages and abilities who maybe can't even afford a vehicle to access, and who need public transit or whatever it might be. And so that's a goal to offer multiple modes of transportation within waterfront communities. Okay. Yes. Oh yeah.
I think this is my opinion, I've been big for my entire life. I think what we need along the river is more of an area for you to park. People come here on boats, they need somewhere they can park and you get out of the river, because the river is rough. St. Clair is awesome because you can go down and park downtown, but I think we need more stopping points. So for me, I think that would be cool to have a kind of like a boating community with places to park, and then transportation through the cities.
Sure.
Because it brings people here and they want to stay here.
Yep. Yeah, along the waterfront, you have the ability to accommodate water-based transit or travel, right? Recreational as well. Yeah, but actually having like a day use marina or something like that for people to stop their boat, stay there, grab a bite at a restaurant or something like that. Yep, that certainly fits well within this best practice here.
I think that'd be
Yeah. And then, with the water access, both physical connections and visual connections to the water. Obviously you want to capitalize and take advantage of it. You don't want any one user to monopolize access to the water, so you want to provide connections to the water. Capitalize on the waterfront to create distinction, to create a sense of place. A lot of communities in a site that really, middle of nowhere kind of a thing, it's hard to create a sense of place. But you add water to it, being on a lake or being on a river, there's a lot of sense of place. The sights and sounds and the smells of the water, good and bad even. It does help to create a unique space or a unique place. Activity for docks and wharves, the opportunity to swim, boat, or fish. Reuse of maybe some aging or older, underutilized water-dependent buildings is an opportunity there. So it provides a strong connection to nautical heritage or maritime environment or the water itself. So you're not losing that kind of built character or architectural character. As I mentioned before, not support of working waterfront as part of revitalization efforts. Preserve environmental areas. Certainly environmental areas help to characterize and support waterfront communities and districts. There's obviously a lot of natural landscapes and processes that are essential to the local ecology and kind of natural systems in place. And we talked about the opportunity to incorporate sustainable design principles that might help to mitigate or help the community become more resilient to potential flooding and things of that nature. So in any waterfront district, the best practice is to balance the need for both development, the built environment, and the natural environment. implement green infrastructure planning, whether it's, green roofs as part of building development, or allow for, bioswales and pervious pavers to allow for, stormwater to infiltrate before it just runs off, right? Protect and maintain and restore natural areas to serve as natural buffers, and also, aesthetics of the district as well. Preserve open space and natural lands for scenic resources and recreational opportunities. Direct development to existing sites and encourage waterfront revitalization. So that's one of the best practices there. I think this kind of goes without saying, being that our study area really is a district that has a large site, with a good potential for redeveloping, and that is an existing site with the utilities, transportation connections largely already in place. So redevelopment of brownfield sites is certainly a best practice, for the benefit of removing environmental, contamination or hazards, but also the providing of new investment opportunities. Again, additional benefits highlighted on the slide here, from a strengthened tax base to a stronger sense of place, and then kind of enhancing and capitalizing on your cultural and scenic resources. Again, back to providing a variety of transportation options. In a waterfront district, it even opens up the door for more opportunities. And there's actually a picture of a day-use marina that maybe you had mentioned would be great within East China Township here. So some transportation strategies that a lot of waterfront district communities have sought to implement or successfully implemented that are considered best practices. Considering some water-based, maybe even public transportation options, maybe a water taxi or something like that. But you have opportunities potentially. Docks, launches, marinas for private and recreational watercraft. Certainly not providing parking spaces along the waterfront itself, but strategically locating parking spaces away from the water, maybe a central location, and then providing ample connections to the different uses from that more central parking area. Certainly facilitating and designing streets and entrance roads and sidewalks to accommodate pedestrians and cyclists as well. And also don't forget the opportunity for the movement of goods and services as well. So, the fact that you have, a potential, it could be for a port facility or something like that in place already. So you can consider, those type of connections as well. And the last two are more about public policy. So this one would be most applicable to, say, the township. As the township wants to facilitate good waterfront districts and communities, the township, as a best practice, should make their policies and practices and zoning rules predictable, fair, and cost-effective. And in doing so, they can support the private sector in making investments within a waterfront district. So the township should look at streamlining their review procedures and maybe timeframes. Should it take 6 months for a project to come, from start to finish through the township, or could you streamline it to encourage development or allow development to come through within a couple of months? Jeff had talked about crafting mixed-use development options, so providing more flexibility to stimulate redevelopment, or to at least allow for redevelopment. Instead of a property owner having to go through a rezoning, then a special land use process, then 3 variances to get a project through. 9 months later, you finally have your approvals. But if you provide more flexibility, that just increases the likelihood of a successful development. And also, from the township's perspective, to make sure that you're in a position and make sure that your policies and zoning rules, for example, can support environmentally responsible development. So, look in your zoning ordinance to see if there's any barriers to, maybe your zoning ordinance would say all parking lots have to be paved, and there's no such thing as, alternatives for green infrastructure improvements or some other types of sustainable design. eliminate those barriers or find opportunities to encourage that to happen. And then lastly, the best practice, the final one, kind of summing it up, is to encourage community and stakeholder collaboration. Certainly as part of a good waterfront planning process, or embedded into a good community, is that meaningful public engagement has occurred. We hope that we're starting off on the right foot in that regard. It's going to take time, but we want to, again, make sure that different stakeholders, people affected, are at the table, and that people have an opportunity to be heard and contribute in these processes. So any questions about the 10 best practices before I hand out the exercise? How about any questions about this? We're nearing the end. It's like we're 10 minutes to 8 o'clock. So we're get you out a little bit early even, potentially. But any questions about what you heard so far during the presentation? Any questions about members of the project team? And just know that we're going to continue to hopefully stay connected with you. You'll have additional opportunities to contribute and be a part of this process. I had mentioned that there's a sign-in sheet at the back table. If you could provide us with your email address so that we can actually share information about this, maybe when the next workshop is going to be, the date, the location, we can actually send that email to you so you don't have to call the township hall to find out when it's going to happen. We can keep you up to date. And also, just a reminder to check the township website as well. We'll be having additional information about this project. The PowerPoint from this presentation tonight will be on the website. Actually, the township will have a link to TV channel 6, where you can watch this video tonight. If you know of people who weren't able to be here tonight but might be interested, let them know that they can watch the video of our meeting tonight as well. Yes, question?
So I live in St. Clair. Is input limited to people that live in East China?
No, of course not. We certainly want to hear voices from across the community and even within the region. As we talked about at one of the initial slides, that this study area, this plan, could have impacts within the region, positive impacts. So we would like to hear what others have to say, even if you're from St. Clair.